Welcome to Open Comments with myself, Ash,
And me, Oliver.
where we'll discuss things openly with our guests from a variety of backgrounds and from different walks of life. Through this podcast, we hope to give you an inside look into a variety of topics with an equal mix of humour and candour. In this series, we'll touch on some of the following topics: healthcare, HR, diversity, access to technology, and lots more. We hope you enjoy our show and look forward to bringing more topics into the fold. Let's get started.
Okay, so thank you, Ash. And as Ash mentioned, today is the topic of sustainable IT. And to help us get through this topic, we have a guest speaker, Abhijit Sunil. Abhijit is a senior analyst at Forrester, serving enterprise leaders. His research focuses on green IT, technology sustainability strategy, data centers and cloud optimization, emerging technologies and climate action, the sustainability professional services market, environmental reporting and organization, and the ROI and business value of environmental sustainability investments. His research also covers data centers and colocation, enterprise IT networks, and emerging technologies. So, Abhijit, welcome and thank you for joining the podcast today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, you recently gave a fantastic presentation on the White Knights of Sustainability Enterprise Architects at our recent EA for Sustainability virtual event. Please, can you give our listeners a little bit of a summary of your presentation for those that may not know much about it?
Absolutely. So, I titled that presentation at the Open Group Forum, The White Knights of Environmental Sustainability, because I truly feel like enterprise architects have a crucial role to play as enablers for sustainability in an organization. And the reason they have such an enormous role to play is primarily from the fact that technology is everywhere. Every industry has been touched by technology now. Every organization is enabled by technology. And even in industries that were traditionally not technology based, technology is a big enabler as of this decade. So therefore, the enterprise architects, IT leaders, the CIO organization, so to speak, within an organization has tremendous power in influencing the way in which the organization can run efficiently, can be more optimized, and therefore also be more sustainable. The IT stack of an organization in a variety of industries have different contributions to the carbon footprint of the organization itself, but it can be significant in industries where the dependence on data centers or data transmission networks is big. As an example, we know that hyperscale cloud providers and content discovery networks and even financial services industry has a big footprint from data centers that they own and manage. So my presentation summarized how the technology leader had a variety of roles to play in making the organization itself more sustainable. First and foremost is on how the tech leader can help in decarbonizing the IT stack. So there are a variety of ways to think about it. And in my talk, I talked about a framework to think about this in, starting with how you procure energy and other resources for your organization, and then looking internally at your operations. So how do you make your data centers more sustainable, your data transmission networks more sustainable, the technology that you use more sustainable, then IT in the workplace. How do you make end user devices more sustainable, procuring such devices, and if efficiently calculating the carbon footprint of these devices. For example, the carbon footprint of data center equipment, servers, storage, networking equipment, and then the life cycle emissions that come from such devices. And also, not to be forgotten, the role that the organization can play in the circular economy. So how can the IT stack have a role in circular economy? How do you manage e-waste responsibly? How do you make the right types of partnerships? All of these are decisions that the tech leader can bring to the table. And then cutting across all of these would be putting into place good measurement tools and processes. And here again, the tech leader has an immense role to play, for example, in identifying the right types of environmental monitoring tools. We see now the advent of a variety of tools that can plug into the workflow systems inside a company and take data from various internal systems and help calculate the carbon footprint, which can then be reported out into standardized frameworks and standards. And how do you assess the various capabilities of these tools? And I have multiple conversations with technology leaders just even on that topic. How do you assess the capabilities of various tools? How do you put all this together into the organization? What types of workflows are necessary? And what other systems can work jointly with the environmental monitoring tool? For example, the HR systems of the organization. What types of data can be fed into the environmental monitoring tool from the HR system? Where else do data need to come from? How do you manage this data? All of this is under the purview and the influence of the technology leader within an organization. So this was the premise of my talk.
Thank you for that very engaging summary. Staying on this topic, please can you tell our listeners about what sustainability means to you? I think we've covered a little bit about that already, but it's really great just to learn more about sustainability from you at the moment and really how passionate you are about it. So thanks so much for giving that overview to your presentation.
Sure. So sustainability, in my mind, especially relating to the technology stack, is synonymous with optimization. So the more optimized, the more efficient we can make make an organization, make the corporate world, the more sustainable in many ways it can be. This is reflected in conversations on, for example, how much premium should we actually pay to be more sustainable? And really the answer is that it shouldn't be a premium to be more sustainable. Sustainability is often a way to be more cost effective, to be more optimized. And we're talking about sustainability, of course, from a corporate sense, but it is really essential for us to think about the outsized roles that companies have in the overall carbon generation of the world, and how we should think about optimizing companies and also making sustainability sustainable within the organizations, so that sustainability is not seen as a cost center. Sustainability is not seen as something that leaders need to invest more time and money and efforts into while returning very little. That perception has to change. And to me, that is the primary message that I always talk about how organizations can think about sustainability as a route for being optimized and being more efficient and, in fact, actually reducing your costs.
And do you think this is ever evolving, or would you say that in recent years sustainability has come about?
It's certainly ever evolving, and in fact, in the recent years, we have had more conversations around this, more understanding about the needs of being more sustainable, about where emissions come from, more understanding about the various emissions sources. We've seen global leaders talk about sustainability and climate action at a scale that we haven't seen ever before. And we have also seen more investments, even from the governments, even from the venture capitalists of the world and the business leaders who talk about this with much more passion than ever before. We see investments and efforts and action from all of these areas. So it will be evolving in the sense that we need more clarity, education, and more balanced views around sustainability. Often, this topic of climate action and climate change is politicized or becomes very much a topic of debate as to how much change needs to happen or if certain things can be trusted. But the more balanced discussions we can have on this topic, the more we can tie sustainability to a better life and being more optimized, like we mentioned, the more clarity we'll have in what to measure and where to take action on.
Thank you, Abhijit. And I'm not an enterprise architect or a data analyst, but we're starting to hear so much more about sustainability. With the Open Group, as you know, we had the event in January and we had so many good presentations. And we talked a little bit about how it's coming more into the fold now. People are more aware of sustainable IT. Do you think there's any advice you could maybe give your either previous self or those starting out their career on how they can get involved with sustainability?
That's a great question. So inside what we call the umbrella of sustainability, there are so many ways in which we can make an effect, and we can work in different roles. As an example, there are roles in which we can look into an organization or an entity's carbon footprint and try to calculate that, which is all very important, because without accurate measurement, we cannot take accurate action. So how do you calculate the carbon footprint of an organization, or how do you calculate the carbon footprint of anything from any industry or any type of emission source? So all of those things, including carbon accounting for an organization, is something that's very important. On the other hand, our roles that look into how to make an organization more circular, roles that different industries can play in the circular economy. How do you manage e-waste and waste management? That's a whole spectrum of activity. Then there are multiple other things, like for example, green energy generation, procurement, and how do you create new projects. That's another whole industry in itself. Then there are technologies that we need to be on the path for net zero. The International Energy Agency had laid out various technologies that we needed to be more sustainable and be on the path to keep our global warming under 1.5 degrees Celsius in the near future. And many of these technologies are still in its infancy and at an experimental stage. So we really need technologists and scientists and developers and professionals in a variety of fields to bring these technologies to maturity and fruition. So therefore, one example, in fact, of that is our carbon capture technologies, which are technologies that help to capture carbon from the air and put it someplace else that is less harmful. There are many solutions for this. In fact, a clear example for that are of course nature-based solutions, even, which is essentially planting more trees and other nature-based solutions, including utilizing mangroves and seaweed. But we need more rules, more minds thinking about these solutions, so that we can have more solutions and bring some of these technologies that are still being developed to an advanced state where we can use them at scale. So therefore, there are multiple ways in which somebody can get involved in sustainability. And if I were to advise someone who is in college now or at school or thinking about sustainability and working in sustainability, I would advise thinking about the problems that are most passionate for you. And this is an advice that I actually have given in my talks at universities and schools, where you may be interested perhaps in finance, or you may be intellectual and may be interested in technology or medicine, or any other discipline that might be closest to them, or that might capture their imagination and ambition. And no matter what role or skill set you develop, it can be used inside the spectrum of various things that we need to do inside sustainability. It could be in climate action or environmental sustainability. It could be in social or even governance aspects of ESG. So I often advise youngsters that I have a chance to interact with to think about the most interesting problems, and then no matter what it might be, there are angles that they can develop, which can lead to climate action related work or sustainability related work.
That's such good advice. There are so many ways that people can get involved in sustainability, and everyone that's starting out their role, there are so many different areas that people can go into. And I like your advice of do what you're passionate about.
Absolutely.
Which is what makes work fun, right?
Indeed.
So I get maybe following on from this a little bit. Could you maybe describe what a typical day looks like for you?
Great. So I work as a senior analyst at Forrester Research, and as an analyst, the great thing is I get to interact with a lot of business leaders, technology leaders, and corporate leaders around the various strategies that they put into place, the various problems that they're trying to solve, and I help solve some of these problems shoulder to shoulder with these business leaders as well. So the majority of my time as an analyst is spent thinking about business problems, trends that are coming our way into the marketplace and into each technology, and how various trends will change technologies going forward, how they may be influential decisions that may come from the government and other places that will influence the ways in which we conduct our day-to-day lives and business. And I also get to connect the dots between various trends that are happening at the same time. And this is in fact how I began to look into sustainability in the first place and started ramping up our capabilities in that area. So when we initially had been discussing the various trends that were occurring in the data center and data transmission space, a clear indicator was how sustainability was a key priority for stakeholders, including customers and employees even, and it was being discussed at the highest levels and across every industry, and therefore we had to look deeper into this, into how we can be more sustainable and the various problems that needed to be solved within an organization, how various roles can inside an organization can play a role in keep making the organization more sustainable. So all of those are ways in which we started to think more deeply into sustainability and climate action in the corporate world. So in my day-to-day, I have a chance, therefore, to research the market and do multimodal analysis on various trends that I see, and I use different techniques for that, of course, like surveys, direct research interviews, a lot of data analysis that leads to quantitative insights into the market. And from my conversations directly with various leaders and stakeholders and various practitioners, I get to learn about what's top of mind for them, what are the different challenges ahead of them, and even what are they working on in terms of new technologies, and what are the various ways in which they plan to take action in the space around them, in their own organization or in their own communities. And I then look into all of the data that I have and produce reports, research reports, and various other publications so that I can put them all together in a form that can be read and used by my clients. Apart from that, I get to talk to various leaders on these issues, on inquiries that analysts often get, like with specialized questions, specialized problems that business leaders may have. So I get asked very interesting questions on a day-to-day basis. Like, it could range from how to put together a sustainability team within a company, to the various emerging technologies in the space, to how to put together a decarbonization strategy for an organization. So I have the opportunity to kind of think through some of these problems in a specialized way, in a focused conversation with business leaders. And then a big part of my work is also talking about the research that we do and thinking about how to um, bring the messaging around sustainability and climate action to as much of an audience, as wide of an audience as possible. So I've worked also closely with universities in putting together projects, in delivering lectures and talks to students, like we mentioned before, to your earlier question about how I engage with youngsters. So I've had the opportunity to talk at schools and universities around climate action, defining some of these terms in the climate space, and also helping illustrate the ways in which different students and youngsters can play a role in the area. So all of this is part of my day-to-day.
That sounds great. It sounds like you never have a dull day.
It is interesting to have a variety, and that's a big advantage I see with the analyst role itself that I'm in. I often get to look at a complex market and make a framework out of that to think more clearly about a complex problem that we are looking at. And I quickly learned how to create case studies and implement digital strategies, and look for case studies at seemingly commonplace examples. So we may look at some change that was made in the sustainability space or by an organization, and then how can you make that into a repeatable solution that others can learn from as well. So that's a very, very interesting thing to be involved in.
Nice. And staying on, learning more about what you do in typical day-to-day, how important is collaboration to you? And I know you've spoken a lot about, different teams that you work with, and it's certainly fantastic to hear about the different areas that you're in as well. But what does collaboration mean to you, and the various situations that you might find yourself in where collaboration takes the front seat?
Collaboration is immensely important for me, and I see this more and more in the sustainability and climate action space as well. Because one line that I hear across the board from business leaders is how no one can do this alone, especially in the sustainability space. We need to have partnerships, and we need to collaborate to bring forth solutions for challenging problems in the climate action space. For me personally, in my day-to-day work, collaboration is extremely important, because as an analyst who looks at various trends in the market, I have to collaborate with others who may have different perspectives of the space, and I often encourage my collaborators and my colleagues who work with me to take opposing views so that we can arrive at a viewpoint amongst ourselves that is that we have internally debated as much as possible as well. And at Forrester, the collaboration is extremely encouraged, and I always feel that collaborating actually makes you not twice as stronger, but many times more stronger, because there are multiple views, there are multiple ideas, all coming together to put something to form a single viewpoint, which can be as strong as possible. In the climate action space, there is immense need for collaboration, and that's because this space is so new in terms of like being thought about as like with such seriousness. In the At Forrester, we did an analysis of Fortune 200 companies, and we found that 61% had a named sustainability lead. So in the organizations that had a named sustainability lead, there is a formed organization that looks at climate actions that the organization need to make. But that leader has to work across the board with a variety of departments within the organization to get the various information that they need to accurately calculate their carbon footprint. For example, in carbon footprint calculation, there is a concept of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Scope 1 is all the emissions that come directly from your organization. Scope 2 is all the carbon emissions that come from the energy that you purchased directly from utility firms and others. And scope 3 is everything else, the emissions that come from employee travel, the emissions that come significantly from the upstream and downstream supply chain, the emissions that even come from commuting. So when a leader sits down, or within the organization, the sustainability team or whoever is responsible sits down to look at the carbon emissions of the entire organization, information has to come from a variety of sources. You need to work with your procurement teams to understand how much energy you purchased. You may even have to work with your utility firm directly on this. You may have to work with the HR systems that you have in place to understand employee commuting and business travel data. You may have to work with your suppliers to influence and decarbonize your scope 3 emissions. So all of those is a clear indicator of how even in the sustainability space, collaboration is key. Within each organization and within the whole within this whole concept of being more sustainable as a whole, we need more ideas, more data, and more collaboration to bring forth more balance in the whole conversation.
Thank you. That's great. I agree with what you're saying with, just ever evolving, with how ever evolving collaboration is, and really the difference that it makes, when you're working with so many different people, the backgrounds that they come from, and also what they bring, to the table as well. So going back to the topic of EA for sustainability, are there any real world cases that have piqued your interest lately that you'd like to share with us?
Very interesting. So in my talk at the Open Group, I discussed how there are certain industries in which the contribution of IT is more than others in terms of carbon footprint. And I'll begin my answer with a trend that I also had highlighted in my talk about how the data centers of the world actually consume more than 1% of global electricity. And even though that is the case, the overall data center energy use had been more or less flat for the past 1 decade, from 2010 up until 2020. The International Energy Agency had published a report that analyzed some of this data. And in that same period, the internet traffic and data center workloads itself had actually increased exponentially. So then why did the energy use of data centers, despite the internet traffic and data center workloads going up so much, remain flat? That was because of efficiencies that data centers had put into place and how data centers overall had become more efficient over time and consuming green energy, etc., as part of their strategies. So this concept is essentially backed by all the technological advancements that has been brought forward. Looking and looking closely at the carbon footprint of an organization and considering the data center as a big point for decarbonization, etc. And I've seen several organizations who actually took this very seriously and have been on a journey to address their internal IT sustainability, sustainability in a very focused manner. One example I can call out has come from my conversations with the U.S. Content Discovery Network, Akamai. They're based out of Boston, and in my conversation with their sustainability teams, they often talk about some of the concepts that I mentioned earlier about sustainability being synonymous with efficiency, and how for Akamai, they've illustrated to us over the past several years, in fact, a couple of decades, their networks have um, increased in capacity many times, but their energy consumption has not quite caught up to the same level of increase in the network capacity, and that is also because of the efficiencies that were put into place by that organization. So there are good case studies like that where certain organizations are more are more tuned towards working with suppliers as well. Another example that I'll take is the work that Microsoft does with their suppliers and in their efforts in reducing their Scope 3 emissions, which are indirect emissions, as I mentioned before. So Microsoft has this portal where they help their suppliers get educated on the ways in which they can decarbonize, the ways in which they can measure and report their emissions. And this has a cascading effect into all of their suppliers to then think about how they can set a baseline for their carbon emissions and therefore maybe take some actions towards being more sustainable in the future. So these are two good examples that I've seen so far. One more example I can take is the IT leader of a large organization based out of Asia, who had several conversations with me on how to put together a plan to begin on their IT decarbonization journey. So the way in which they have started to think about this is to put together an assessment of what are the most impactful areas from which they can gain benefits for sustainability, and out of those, what are the most pragmatic places where they can take action. It could be their data centers, it could be with their end user devices, it could be with e-waste management. So they're trying to analyze that and then think about what types of investments are needed in the space, what types of skill sets are needed in the space, and importantly, how much effect will that make in their overall decarbonization journey. So they're putting into place all of those plans. And so these are some good examples that we've come across so far of organizations decarbonizing their supply chain, decarbonizing their IT stack, and most importantly, of the role that enterprise architects and IT leaders can also play in sustainability.
Thank you, Abhijit. And that actually ties into something that you already mentioned earlier when you were talking with Ash, but you said collaboration is key, and I think that perfectly sums up how we can not only approach sustainability, but also how we, in general, can work as a whole. And that can apply to almost anything and anyone. And that's definitely something we encourage at the Open Group, and I know you would encourage at Forrester too. But
Absolutely.
I do have one more question for you that I'd like to ask. And it's, can you think of the last time you've achieved something great and how it made you feel? And it might not necessarily be in your career. It can be whatever you like.
Very interesting. I think that so I'll answer this in two ways. One is about how in my career I've had significant milestones, and maybe the other could be like a more personal milestone. So one of which in my very recent past with my career had been how I had contributed an article for Forbes magazine, and it was about how and why an organization should be more sustainable. And this was more than a couple of years ago, when more and more organizations were beginning to talk about this and in a more structured manner, and we were really seeing a lot more concrete actions that organizations were taking in sustainability measurement, reporting, etc. And that article that I wrote got shared widely, in fact, by some of the Fortune 10 organizations. And I remember a call out from one of the leaders based out of Europe who mentioned how that article made him think about why sustainability is critical, and how then we began to think about the impact that that sustainability can have within the organization. In the article, I talked about how the motivation to be more sustainable comes from your own employees, your customers, your investors, the regulations that are coming your way, and also, most importantly, then about the impact that you can have on the planet. And I illustrated in my article about how these on where these motivations came from, and how each of these influences the sustainability strategy of an organization. So that the impact that article made was a sense of gave me a sense of pride.
I can imagine being able to rethink IT leaders' way of approaching things is certainly something that's worth talking about.
Yeah, indeed. And related to this, but I think more personally, was a talk that I gave at the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay as part of a project that Professor Kavi Arya at the Indian Institute of Technology leads, called E-Yantra. This project actually encourages students from across India to come together and design projects, and under the leadership of the team that Professor Arya at IIT Bombay leads. And I was invited to talk about sustainability and the importance of thinking about problem solving for sustainability in the agriculture space. And I was really encouraged to see how eventually, after the series of conversations on sustainability, the student body who was at that university then took on many projects around climate action, and brought forth really cool innovations on technology that can help in decarbonizing various aspects of agriculture in India. So I'd say that was a big another source of pride for me in the recent past.
That's fantastic. That's really great to hear, more about the role that's played in your career so far and all that you do. I mean, it's very fascinating learning more about you as well. So we'd like to segue into one of my personal favorites, hobbies. I think that's always a great way to, get to know people further as well. So are there any hobbies that you have and that you like to do?
Well, one of my primary hobbies is the most boring and commonplace hobbies of all, which is to simply read. And I think that's partly necessitated by my role as an analyst. Almost every analyst that I work with, at the leaders at Forrester and every other place, are avid readers because we need to be aware of multiple subjects across multiple topics and industries and the trends that are coming our way, and various and the impact that and these trends can have in businesses and how we think about the future. So I have widely expanded the topics that I usually read, by the time I became an analyst. So I have not only read about views that kind of help me understand sustainability, but also about topics that are tangential to it, and therefore I'd say that is a hobby that's very very close to, I think, any analyst, and for me as well.
That's great. I personally really like reading as well. I don't think the books that I read are on the same vein as you, but I think it's a great way to not only learn more about the world, but to really immerse ourselves in, the different stories, whether it's fictional, whether it's non-fictional, and it just gives us more of a sense of purpose, right? Because you can learn so much from various stories, and it's just so fascinating. So to end things, we'd like to really just extend an extra big thank you to you for joining our show. It's been really great not only learning more about you, but also about EA for sustainability in more depth. It's such a broad and exciting topic, really, that it's been really nice just learning more about not only the presentation that you gave during our January virtual event, but also about how important it is to you and what it means to you as well. So thank you so much for that. So for those that would like to keep up to date with what you do and would like to get in touch, where can they reach you? For example, LinkedIn, other socials?
LinkedIn is the best way to reach me, and my email with Forrester is asunil@forrester.com. Please feel free to reach out.
Perfect, that's great. And to all our listeners who are keeping up to date with all of our episodes so far, we'd like to also extend a thank you to you for, tuning in to our podcast and listening to all the episodes that we've done so far, and also really just learning more about our guests in more depth. So thank you so much. And until next time, that's goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Abhijit, for joining.